One of the earlier successes that happened during my training was quite early on, actually. It was like just after I'd started experimenting with the basic recipe and going that direction. And I had a friend in California, and her husband has had many health challenges. And there was a point in August of 2020 where, because of the skills, I reached out to her and said, Patty, I think I can help you. And I knew I was sort of crossing the line. We're not supposed to work with friends, but she was struggling so bad. And I really felt like it could be the answer for her. So the situation that we worked on, her husband had been admitted to the hospital, and they got to a point that they weren't sure if he was going to live or die. And she arrived at the hospital and she went into his room, and he was hooked up to all the tubes and the IVs and all of that very scary stuff. If you're not in the medical field, it can be incredibly traumatic to see your loved one in that kind of a space. So whenever she spoke about that event for years afterward, and she can be very emotional, Patty, and she would just burst into tears, and she could hardly talk about it. So we started working on it, and I was completely blown away. She went from a 10 plus in her emotional distress score to a 0 in 3 rounds. I mean, it was boom, boom, boom. I was stunned. And I was talking to her just the other day, and this is like, 9 months since we did this. And every time we talk, she says, I can't believe I am still able to talk about Jim's surgery without losing it. She says, thank you so much for that. It has been such a relief. And it makes me feel so good.
One was a particular friend of mine, and she wanted me to do some work with her daughter, who was had addictions and having struggles, etc. And we were sitting and having a cup of tea, and there was another young lady with us, and I said, would you like to experience what it's about? And she said, yeah, that'd be great. She had this experience from the age of 15, a memory, and she had actually been what I don't like to call survivors, but she was a breast cancer survivor, and she'd gone through that particular area. So she told me, she touched on what it was about, and I said, okay, so we'll do the basic recipe. That's the introduction. We did 1 round, and it was gone. She went, oh my God, it's gone. And I went, she said, I can't, the heaviness in my chest is gone. And I said, beautiful. And then she said to me, came back to me a couple of days later, and she said, I've actually tried to go back to that memory. And she said, my mind won't let me. I went, and I said, that's the beauty of this therapy.
I want to think right now, I'm thinking about a client that it was such a great session. Her brother had passed away a couple of years ago, and her memory was that she couldn't get past that. She was racing to the hospital to get there before he died. And she said she was holding on to the steering wheel, and she just kept on saying, I'm coming. I'm coming. Just hold on. I'm coming. And when she got to the hospital, she found out that he had passed, like literally minutes just before she had gotten there. And so she had held on to a tremendous amount of guilt that she wasn't there for her brother when he had passed. She kept on talking about how tired her hands were and how it was going out of her hands. And when it was all over with and she had released everything, I had brought her back I said, you've been holding on to that steering wheel for 2 years. And the next time, our next session, when I checked in with her about the memory, she said, she says, it's okay that I wasn't there. She said, I realized I really didn't have to be there for him to pass. And she says, I realized that if he passed without me or passed with me there, she said, he's still with me. And she said, and maybe if I was there, she says, maybe he wouldn't have passed as easily. And so she had this whole new perspective and this whole new peace and freedom around the fact of not being there, that she was no longer beating herself up and no longer feeling this tremendous guilt for not being there for her brother. And with that same client, I had done another, it was our last session that we did. And one of her main response is freeze. Her main response is freeze, never to speak up for herself. And she had a lot of complex trauma as a child and never felt valued by her parents. And we cleared this memory of when she felt trapped in the car with her father. And we cleared the memory of what she wished that she could have said and what she wished she could have done. And that was an incredible session. And at the end of it, she's like, I no longer have to feel trapped. I no longer have to feel trapped in that car. I no longer have to be trapped on the couch. She just started naming off all these memories that she had of feeling trapped whenever she was with him. And it was such a freeing experience for her, and to see her body language and everything change. And I got messages from her a couple days later, and she said, I don't know if this makes sense. She goes, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in my body.
There's another person that, yes, I worked with, and we did quite a few sessions. And I think because she's let go of a lot, it's easy now to demonstrate herself to the world and just come up and about. And I look at that and I'm smiling inwardly and knowing that if I could have made just that small amount of difference, that small amount of difference is like putting the drop of ink in the water. It's pervasive. It goes in all places. So even though, yeah, it's just that tiny bit, it's a huge bit.
There's a few. There's one woman I've reached out to that I've worked with previously in other ways, and I knew that she was struggling. I have a few women I know that have struggled in this particular case after the sudden, unexpected death of their spouse at a relatively young age. And I knew that she was struggling and stuck. So in a matter of 6 weeks, she went from, waking up every day feeling a pit in the stomach and not much hope, to being okay. Like she had hope. She didn't feel triggered anymore by being around other couples. Whereas before it triggered her to be around couples because it just reminded her of her loss. And her friends were saying to her, you're so resilient. I can't believe how resilient you are. And she said, it's because of you. And it's not just me, it's the gentle trauma release, right? It's the tools and the work that we did together. And this is in 6 weeks. This is a woman who'd been suffering for 3 years and had no hope to feeling hopeful and at peace with herself. Obviously still misses her spouse, but no longer in that dark place.